What's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott here of the Nolecast, back again for another episode. And yeah, it's another episode where we are not going to have a Winston reaction. Not that it's entirely surprising that Florida State, this FSU team, lost to Miami. Vegas predicted it. Everybody who had watched these two teams predicted it. And it kind of played out in such a fashion that was also pretty predictable. In fact, I almost nailed the correct score. And, we said, like, here's kind of how it would have to play out. The defense would have to play pretty well overall, and the offense would have to find ways to somehow score points, and the defense would probably have to create some turnovers. And you got a couple of those things. And you also didn't get a couple of those things that are pretty crucial. And we'll talk about that in a second here. But ultimately, a couple problems that you can point out. Obviously, the some of the run fits by the linebackers and some of the defensive linemen getting moved. Although I thought the D line overall had a pretty good game, that was a problem. We had highlighted that Miami's offense and particularly their run game was a really good one, and maybe was not getting quite the love because of how well Cam Ward was playing and all the big time numbers that Cam Ward was putting up. And I think that's probably true. After watching that game, that looks like a damn good run game to me. FSU, all their defenders who got ran over, probably can say, much of the same. And yet, I think you have to be a little bit proud, at least somewhat, of the defense because they did play with good fight, right? And it would be very easy to sort of just lay down if you're on defense when you know that the offense that has to support you just, has no chance in hell of scoring, right? 14 points, 248 total yards. I think, I'm pretty sure your long play of the day by a good bit was a quarterback sneak that basically busted into a quarterback like scramble because Miami just didn't tackle the guy. So that was unfortunate. Obviously, some of the penalties I think were unfortunate. And I want to get into stuff tonight that is a little more forward looking as we've been trying to do. Definitely want to thank the legendary team. Chad did such an awesome job for us. 844 FSU loan. It's 844 FSU loan. That's the number to call if you want to get an awesome home loan. I've done it twice, and I fully recommend everybody else doing it as well. May use Chad again soon here for something coming up. So, got a couple Patreon questions I think we can kind of get to here to discuss this game. Are there any positives going forward that don't involve guys who will be gone? It's an interesting one. I always watch all the press conferences. Once in a while I ask questions, usually not. And I thought Mike Norvell's press conference today was interesting. We're going to hit on this a little bit tonight. But I was kind of curious as to what he was going to say. And he made sure to point out how well guys like Kai Bates and Charles Lester have been playing and how well they've been practicing and how he was excited to see them get in and how there are certain guys who, maybe because of who is playing the position, like maybe they were a little more blocked, right? Because certain guys who are still playing well, like you're not going to pull out a senior who's playing well necessarily just to put in a young guy. But I thought Mike Norvell made a point to point out some of these young guys who I think he thinks do have a future in the program today. And he said he was pretty happy with cornerback overall this season, both the older guys and also the younger guys. So I would take that away. I will tell you that I do think, and I know this sounds insane because look what happened in the Duke game. Look what happened in this game. 11 of 32 for 115 yards and a touchdown. I do think there are a lot of teams out there, maybe not 100, but I bet you like more than half of D1 college football would see what FSU has at quarterback right now on this roster and be like, yeah, we'd trade our room for that right now. And I get it. I know that sounds insane. I see the numbers. I get it. I just think you have a lot of promise there with some of those young quarterbacks. And I'm curious, as to how they're going to develop, who you're going to go with. My guess here at this point is Luke, but it wouldn't shock me if either of these guys end up being pretty damn good players down the line. And I'm dead serious about that. So you'll have to see kind of how that plays out. But I saw some good things from both. Obviously, receiver continues to be a major problem. In this game, the offensive line, Darius Washington not being able to go. Look, I think there's probably a reason nobody on the beat even came close to picking an FSU upset, right? And almost everybody had Miami covering by some amount. Like Darius not playing, you really can't function when you don't have him and you don't have multiple other guys. Like you get like Jacob Rizzi playing and just guys who I don't think you ever really thought would play for you this year or maybe ever. Like guys who just probably can't play physically. Maurice Smith with all the snap issues. It's it's just not a good spot to be in. And I don't think that any quarterback is truly going to function very well behind this offensive line, particularly not in a somewhat at least hostile road environment. Although, man, I got the Dodgers game on in the background, but like, dude, did that even feel like a true rivalry game to you? I don't know. Maybe I am reading this wrong, but it just kind of felt like another ho hum game almost for Miami, which is bad and sad on all sides, to be honest. I don't know. So more things that you can take away. I think quarterback you can take away. You have a pretty good shot that one of these guys is going to turn into something. I know that sounds insane, but I do think if you look at some of the individual plays, you'll probably agree with me. Receiver, some good things, also clearly some bad. Tight end again, some good things from the young guys, definitely some bad. I don't know. I do know though that, and I'm not trying to like pump sunshine here because I've never been that guy, and even when FSU was really crushing last year, you still never heard me say like, yeah, I think they're going to go win a national title because I didn't really believe that. But I don't think that the line to like where you are to where you want to get, I don't think it's that necessarily insane to think that you can get back there, not to national title contention, but at least to like respectability in somewhat short order, to be honest. And I think that is absolutely possible. It's not guaranteed, but I think it's certainly possible. All right, next Patreon question here. Does each successive game make you think that Mike cannot get it back? I think this is an interesting one. And to be honest, my answer is no. At a certain point, you just have to realize in this season, things are not going to get materially better. They'll probably only get somewhat better depending on the quality of opponent that you're playing. So if Norvell can't get this thing together in game 6, I really don't expect that like not being able to get it together in game 8 or game 10. Sometimes there's just not a lever that you can pull, right? It's a 365-day operation to build a team, and they just didn't do a very good job of it this year. Some of that is bad process. I think some of that is also bad luck. Certainly, you have to have both to go from 13-0 to whatever and whatever they're going to be 2-10, 3-9. Shoot, God, I hope not 1-11. But no, like the it's already a car crash. If a couple other cars hit the crash, like hit the initial car that stopped on the side of the road, once everybody's out, like if the car is already totaled, the cars are already totaled, right? Like this season has been totaled for a good long while now. So I'm not saying I don't get mad about it, but I don't like drastically change my thoughts on what is going to happen or what needs to happen based on each successive game. There are things that annoy me, certainly. Like, you broke out some plays for this game that maybe you think if you had run it in a prior game, you watch some of the young guys, you're like, damn, they kept playing DJ. I understand why they did it because they like even today with this press conference, Norvell's like talking about the dedication to coaching this game and this team and like the promise that he makes to these players that he's going to coach them. So it's I don't know. It's tough. Uh, but it is what it is. So I'm not like extra discouraged by it necessarily, but I am a little discouraged, certainly. Like each successive loss, each like no show, it does kind of, I guess, weaken your resolve a little bit, and so that sucks, and that's disappointing. But overall, no, like this loss doesn't have me any more doubting on what Norvell can or can't do than the prior loss, really. Now, I will say, I do wonder because of like what he thinks of like how people operate their programs. I do wonder, like, does this have a Georgia-like effect, or maybe like the effect that, in my opinion, Georgia should have had? And although I think it's unfair to say that with the Georgia thing, because obviously there wasn't a whole lot of time to fix like what Georgia, would have done. But ultimately, I'm a little like, I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say here is, like, do you think that losing to Miami specifically, with how Cristobal runs his program and like how recruiting focused he is, do you think that that is maybe eye opening for Norvell? I think FSU fans kind of have to hope that it is. Not that they want their guy to be Mario Cristobal, but certainly the emphasis on talent acquisition is something we've talked about. I remember about 2.5 years ago, I was like, hey, like if FSU keeps recruiting like this out of high school and Miami keeps recruiting like this out of high school, they're going to have guys that can kick your guys' ass across the lines of scrimmage. Doesn't mean they're going to win necessarily, because a lot of things goes into coaching football, and certainly that staff has blown plenty of games in their time. But I do wonder if Mike seeing that changes how he thinks about some things. Like what is the proper balance of recruiters versus coaches on the staff? That's a question we've asked oftentimes here on the Nolecast. And so that's kind of the thing I wonder if you want to take away like one thing from this game as far as reconsidering how you think about things, or think of maybe reconsidering like how you think Norvell thinks about things. I wonder about that. All right, next question brought to you, of course, by Congruity. Congruity HR Solutions. Optimize your business to make sure your business the best it can possibly be. Certainly not a season that has been optimized at all. But yeah, anyway, if you want to optimize your business, Matt Lewis can awesome crush it for you. congruityhr.com/Knowles. That's congruityhr.com/Knowles. So, do you buy Mike's comments today about being open to doing what it takes, looking at all aspects of the program, some of the comments he made about play calling, whether he needs to be the primary play caller or not? I'm not trying to carry water for Mike Norvell. I actually think Mike Norvell's a pretty good football coach, but he's clearly messed up some things this year. But in this case, I do kind of buy it. Um, Ultimately, I don't think that Norvell is a guy that has to call the offense, right? Or has to have like 100% control of the offense. Maybe he still calls it, but it has somebody else with some input on it, or different analysts, or whatever, right? I don't think they have to go and get some, quote unquote hotshot offensive coordinator. Maybe they do so, but I don't know they have to. Um, but I don't think that Norvell is like some of these coaches. I just never thought Jimbo would ever really give it up, because none of his actions ever said that he did. But I think if you look at Norvell's history, I don't think he's so married to having to call it, if we think him calling it is actually the problem. But I thought it was interesting today that he did kind of share, yeah, maybe this is something to look at, right? He said like he has to be open to looking at all aspects of the program when you fail to this extent. And I think that was an honest statement that he made. It's something that I think he might be willing to do. So if you're somebody out there, who thinks, hey, the way to optimize this, like Congruity, is to go get a new offensive coordinator, I think your comments that you heard from Mike Norvell today, I think those have to be pretty heartening to you, right? Maybe he is open to trying something like that. Uh, this kind of dovetails into another question that we had, though, which was, where are we at? Oh, you guys mentioned a couple of weeks ago that as the season unravels, not all the staff will be pulling together. Some guys won't be trying to recruit quite as hard. They know they're probably getting fired, etc. Do you think that is some of the reason for the recent decommitments? Do you think that's the reason for the Wiley decommitment? Um, in part, yeah, I do actually. Again, if you know you're on a sinking ship, it's easy to say like, yeah, you got to coach out the season, got to do this, got to do that. But ultimately, everybody's going to be kind of looking out for themselves too. It's just sort of human nature. And yeah, I think that probably has a little bit to do with what they're doing. Now, this also dovetails into another issue that I brought up recently, which is that I really don't expect like mid-season coaching fires or changes. However, I don't think you should or could or should. I probably should. I don't think you really should rule out like late season coaching changes, especially because the portal opens 7 days after National Signing Day. National Signing Day this year is December 4th. Like that's real early, So you look at this, that's coming up pretty quick. Like we got a month or so. And you take a look, it's like, okay, maybe you want some different guys on staff. Probably not for the high school stuff quite so much because the high school stuff is largely it's largely hay in the barn. I'm not saying that FSU is going to keep everybody they have currently committed, which is not many kids now anyway. But what I'm saying is like you're probably not going to forge a whole lot of like new relationships, get a lot of late high school flips. I don't think down the stretch this year. But for portal stuff, having some guys who have some pre-existing relationships with folks, that's actually could be something to help you out a little bit there. So I would not be shocked if you saw some coaching changes. Maybe Charleston Southern week, maybe the week of the UF game. Uh, that would be something I think I would consider, to be honest. So I don't know. We'll take a look at that. Did you guys watch the Pitt game? I thought the Pitt game was interesting, right? Like that's a team that what are they like 4-8, 3-9 last year? Terrible Pitt team. Now they're undefeated. Now they're like legitimately in the playoff conversations. They can win like 3 more ball games. Turnarounds happen in this sport pretty quick. Like Indiana, not that I think FSU is going to go undefeated next year. I don't, but look at Indiana. Like last year, 4-8. This year, again, undefeated. I think there's a lot of stuff going on that people need to kind of just be apprised of. It's not a sport that has a whole lot of like staying power at the top unless you recruit at like a crazy, crazy high level. And FSU certainly doesn't because Norvell, I don't think emphasizes that or at least at this point really cares about doing so. Now we'll see if this loss to a program that does care about doing so, if this loss changes things, right? Shopping in the premium aisle, so to speak, really making sure that you have the salespeople to get it done. I don't know. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Let me just scan here what else we got. I want to do an interesting show always, but I want to make sure that it's concise if necessary. All right. What else do we got here? Sorry. All right, the final one tonight, of course, brought to you by Charlie Park. Charlie Park Rooftop Restaurant. Awesome, awesome, awesome job they do, man. Like also supporting the show. Awesome there. Good time. Get on top. Charlie Park Rooftop Restaurant. Matt, like they crush. So if you want to hit them up, do it. Got the link right there in the show notes. Anyway, got a couple questions like this. I'm going to combine them into one. What do you think is going to happen? It's probably a good one to end on. I think FSU will probably lose a couple more recruits. They're sitting at 11 right now. This class is going to be just kind of crappy as far as overall numbers. This class is going to put you further away from the goal of being able to kind of sustain with talent in the pipeline to the extent that anybody can do that. I guess a couple teams out there probably still can, and most teams have to really rely on the portal pretty good nowadays. But certainly that's a team that possibly can. So I think you'll lose a couple more recruits. I think you'll probably have 3 or 4 coaching changes on the staff. Maybe that's obvious to everybody, but I don't know that it truly is obvious to everyone. So I do think you're going to get a couple. I think 3 or 4 is probably the most likely outcome there. And I kind of think you're going to win a game that you don't expect to win. I'm not saying you're going to beat Florida. I'm not saying you're going to beat North Carolina. Obviously, a small home underdog to UNC this weekend. Should be awesome weather, by the way. Have you guys looked at the weather on this? It's little fall feel, but not like freezing cold. So that should be pretty dope. So yeah, a couple coaching changes. I think the recruiting class will continue to fall apart as a lot of people just kind of continue to pull in their own direction. And I do think the team, just because the defensive line and because you do have some guys who maybe with the ball in their hands can break it Who knows? Maybe you get some turnovers in your favor finally, although the numbers under Fuller so far don't really suggest that you will. That's kind of how I think this thing goes down. So I am really running out of things to say about this team. It's just, I'm very glad this is not a daily show because I don't know how in the world I would just recycle these talking points. The season has been over for a good long while. We're excited about watching some of the younger guys. Some of them are playing well. Some of them are playing poorly, but like occasionally show some flashes of playing well, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, y'all have a good one. I will join you again with a preview. Maybe have a special guest on for that. We will see. And take care. This has been the Nolecast.